Well, thank you for having me. It's really an honor to be able to speak with you and have voters get to know me a little better. So
yeah, this is all about getting to know each other, or for us voters to get to know you. So where did you grow up and go to school?
Sure. So I was born in a little island in the middle of San Francisco Bay called Alameda. And for our vets out there, you probably know that as a big naval station. My grandfather was a tool and die maker and machinist out there. So my mom was raised there in Alameda. My dad also went to high school there. And that's where they met. And so shortly after they were married, we moved as a family to a little town called Newark on the East Bay. Really similar to Spokane Valley. When I moved here in the early 80s, it reminded me a lot of growing up in Newark. It was an agricultural town. Our biggest employer was the Leslie Salt Factory and the Cedar Mill. And I spent my youth just riding my bicycle everywhere. We had a community pool, about 9,000 people. And what they called a bedroom community. A lot of folks lived there that worked in other areas around the Bay. My father was a city councilman when our little town was incorporated, and he and my grandfather owned a small business, an appliance repair shop, and so just grew up with a family full of service. My dad was a Marine Corps veteran. My mom volunteered for the American Cancer Society and the Arts Commission. They were both deacons in our church. And so just a great little town to grow up in, and it grew a lot. And I think now it's probably about the size of Spokane Valley or even bigger. So just a really great place to grow up. I'm the oldest of three, and spent a lot of years being an athlete on a swim team, played volleyball, went to Newark High School, straight A student all the way through. So a little intro to my childhood.
Well, I suspect one of the answers to your first work experience as the oldest of three was probably babysitting. But what are some other early work experiences?
Yeah, so actually my first paid job was working at our local pool in the snack area, and then doing some lifeguarding. Of course, did a little babysitting like a lot of teenage kids do. And then probably some of the most adventurous times in my life, where I graduated from high school 6 months early, went to Nebraska to spend some time with my aunt and uncle in Hastings, Nebraska, and I detasseled corn one summer, and it was a waitress in a Woolworths diner, and again taught swim lessons for the Red Cross. So a lot of my youth was spent just doing random jobs, and kind of gave me a good feel for what's out there. I always wanted to be a nurse. And so that's what my focus was through school, was math and science. And I knew that I was going to get into nursing. I have an aunt who's a nurse. She married as a nurse in a MASH unit in Vietnam, and they were always my heroes, and I wanted to be just like them.
And so you are, because that is your current profession.
Absolutely, that's right.
That sounds like a lot of really interesting travel that you did. What are some things that you maybe learned from those different places that you've lived that you can bring to Spokane Valley?
Yeah, sure. So again, grew up in the Bay Area, lived in Central Valley for a little while before I found myself as a single young mother. Moved to Spokane Valley. That's where my aunt and uncle same aunt and uncle that were nurses lived at the time. About 6 months after I moved here, they moved to Florida, and I just loved it here. So I stayed, raised my son here. Um, didn't do too much U.S. travel, but I did over time have the opportunity to do a lot of international travel. So I've been to Africa. I did some medical relief work in Southeast Asia as well as South America. And those experiences are life-changing. You know, those just let us really understand that, you know, as Americans, we have a certain privilege, just being able to have a passport, being able to have access to healthcare, being able to have access to quality education. And when you go to those, especially in the areas that I was in Vietnam and in Southeast Asia, Thailand, did most of my work in orphanages and refugee camps. And in South America, I flew into the Amazon and provided health care for underserved communities in very, very rural and remote areas. So just we have so many good fortunes here as Americans. And what that brings to me, both as a nurse and as a potential representative for our district, is a really good worldview of what human rights are, a really good view of what universal healthcare should be, of what quality education should be, and making sure that everybody has an equal foot up so that we can all meet our best potential.
Okay. Well, that sounds, the volunteer opportunities sound just wonderfully rewarding. And
Sure.
but that brings to mind then the other question of what prompted you to step out of a fulfilling and rewarding career to pursue a political office.
Right. So, you know, life happens for a reason and certain opportunities are presented. And in 2016, I had been winding down some of my international volunteer work, especially in South America. It became a lot more working through the embassies there. So, you know, that we all, I think, are impacted over our lifetimes and informed by our experiences. And in 2016, I had the opportunity to really understand that we have our own special needs here at home, and our own neighbors are in need. So I just had the opportunity to switch gears and focus my skills and my resources on volunteering here in our own communities. So I started getting involved with Volunteers of America. I have been doing a lot of volunteer work for Hope House, which is the women's shelter, and Crosswalk, which is the teen homeless shelter. Really addressing food insecurity through agencies like Meals on Wheels, and just this year with the pandemic and the economic fallout, the wonderful new organization called Spokane Food Fighters. So doing work with them too. So just, you know, became a volunteer rather than somebody that had a worldview and putting those resources outside of our country, just bringing things back home and taking care of folks here. And keep in mind that as an ICU nurse for 18 years and now as a nurse practitioner for over 11 years, I see thousands of our neighbors in our community every day in my work environment. And so I have a really good understanding of the impacts of education and healthcare and food insecurity, and trying to make ends meet when you have to wonder, do I buy the insulin or do I pay my rent this month? So those are all really good life experiences that have informed not only my personal views, but my political views, and also drove me to seek office.
Okay. So how do you see the responsibilities of a state representative? You bring this depth of background. How do you see the responsibilities of the office?
So I think a representative needs to be a representative, and that means listening to every point of view, into account everybody's lived experiences, and being a representative for everybody in our district, regardless of their political affiliation, their religious background, their educational status, their economic status. And with that worldview and the experience that I have as just not a nurse, but also as a mother and a grandmother and as a constituent, I know that I have the leadership and the experience to really encompass what that role means. I'm not a single issue voter, and I'm not going to be a single issue representative. I think that we have a lot more in common than what makes us different. And it's those shared values and those shared needs that need to be addressed by your representative.
Well, you almost, I think, answered the last question, which is here's your 30, 60 seconds to answer directly. Why should people vote for Lori Feagan for state representative in the 4th Legislative District?
Well, thank you again for the opportunity. And I know that I have the leadership skills and the experience to take care of everybody and be your representative. I'm a great listener. I always show up. I'm a hard worker with a great work ethic. And I find dignity in every human life. So just keep in mind that, I know that having an R or a D after your name is important to some people, but really dig deep. Understand that the people that are on your ballot really want to work for you. So that's what I'd like to do. I want to go to work for you and make sure that everybody here in our district has the representative that they deserve.
Okay. Well, thank you for taking the time to join us today, Lori, and good luck and enjoy your campaign.
Well, thank you so much again for the opportunity.
90 million Christians are eligible to vote.
40 million didn't.
That's 45% of eligible Christians not voting.
We can change that.
We believe We Vote was designed to arm people of faith with information on candidates
And how they line up with biblical and constitutional principles.
It's simply WeBelieveWeVote.com.
We're on a mission to rev up the 2020 election.
Tell your friends, your neighbors, and especially your pastors to rev up.
Be an educated voter.
Arm yourself with truth based on the Word of God.
2020, rev up.
Register, educate, vote.
Rev up.
Rev up.
Rev up 2020.